Okay. Uh, Here's a review for the swallowing exam. There we go. Um, what kinds of teeth are there? Oh, I guess, well, you know how to do this. Pause it if you want to answer the question, or just listen and make like flashcards or whatever. Okay. So what kinds of teeth are there? Okay, I guess I hit the button. Incisors, canines, premolars, and molars. Those are in order from the midline back. Mesial to distal. Remember, mesial is what happens in the mouth instead of medial. So the incisors are the most mesial, and then you've got canine, premolar, and molar. How many of each? Well, there's two incisors, one canine, two premolars, and at least two molars. What do they do? The incisors are good for cutting. The canines are good for ripping. Premolars are kind of a combination of canines and molars, so they're good for ripping and grinding, and molars are really good for grinding. Okay, what facial muscles might be used to take the first bite of food? Every facial muscle that we've talked about. We've got facial muscles that we haven't talked about, like for your eyebrows and stuff, and you don't, who knows if you're using those. I guess if you're like winking at somebody while you're taking first bite, sure. But all the facial muscles that we've talked about could be used to take the first bite. What about the muscles that are used to keep the cheeks flattened? Well, that is the buccinator and risorius. Why would you do this? One is to keep food in your mouth, not losing it over into the sides of your mouth or swallowing unchewed food accidentally. So, if you have food over in the side of your mouth, because you're not activating your buccinator and risorius, that was weird. Oh, we're still recording. Okay. I think possibly my power went out for a second, and my monitor turned off. Okay. So to keep your food in your mouth, if you activate your swallowing reflex and you have unchewed food over in the sides of your mouth, you may accidentally swallow this unchewed food and choke. So the buccinator and risorius are helpful for those reasons. Oh, and we're also not activated on the thing now. There we go. Which two muscles, and a third from a different group, are going to help lower the mandible? These are the geniohyoid and the digastric. Digastric is right here. It's two bellies. Remember, digastric, two bellies. Geniohyoid is right here from the jaw to the hyoid bone. And then also the mylohyoid, which is from another group. That group, GR poop is what I've got written here. The mylohyoid is the one that forms the bottom of your mouth, basically the whole bottom surface of your mouth, but it also is going to help open the jaw. Which two are going to raise the mandible and crush things? Those are the temporalis and the masseter, which is down here. I'm going to change this to laser pointer. So temporalis and masseter here. Raise the mandible and crush things. Which two are good for grinding food? The internal and external pterygoid, right here. And which one makes up most of the mouth floor? Well, I already gave you that. It's the mylohyoid. What helps form the bolus and mixes food? and saliva. Also the mylohyoid and the tongue. And I guess you could consider the palate, the hard palate, part of that group too, because using the mylohyoid and the tongue to push the bolus up against the roof of the mouth helps form the bolus. But it's really just a stationary thing, so it's not something that's actively taking part. It's the mylohyoid and the tongue. Okay, oh look, tubarial. That was supposed to be hidden. What are the 4 salivary glands? Well, one is tubarial. It's the new one. It's up here in the nasopharynx. There's also the sublingual gland, which is the one right under your tongue that people gleek out of. The parotid gland. Oops. Actually, let me jump to the submandibular first. Submandibular is further back under your tongue, and submandibular and sublingual actually share the same saliva tube. And then lastly, there's the parotid gland, which is towards the back of your mouth, and the tube that secretes saliva actually comes out on your cheeks. So what's in saliva, aside from like gross stuff? Well, there's amylase, which helps break down starches. There's lipase, which helps break down fats. There's antimicrobials, which help protect you from different things that can make you sick. There's also, and I don't know why I have this, don't have this listed, but there's trace minerals in saliva also. Why is chewing gum good for you? For all of these things. Helps clean the teeth. All the amylase and the lipase will break down starch and fats that are stuck on the teeth. Antimicrobials will help get rid of gingivitis, bacteria. And then also the trace minerals that are in saliva are good to strengthen the enamel of your teeth. While you're chewing, where is the velum? It's usually down for breathing. I mean, like, sometimes you're also talking while you're chewing, so it could go up if you're to form different words. But the point here is it can be up or down. You usually are breathing while you're chewing. And the reason why that's important is when you swallow, when you go into the swallowing reflex, you will stop breathing reflexively. The velum will go up for roughly a second and just completely pause breathing and prevent food from getting into the nasal passages. The swallowing reflex triggers at the anterior facial pillars, which I don't have pictured here, but that's where the swallowing reflex is triggered. How does that change with older people? Well, it moves backwards. And why? Because we're not 100% sure. With some people, it's behavioral training, like they've trained themselves to move their swallowing reflex back just so they can hold more food in their mouth. And with others, it could be a loss of sensation. If it's behavioral training, this is a lot easier to fix because you just kind of like train behavior the other way. If it's a loss of sensation, that's harder to figure out because it's not like you can get that sensation back, but you can help strengthen some muscles that may bring some of the sensation back, or it at least can create a better barrier at the back of the tongue. Why is it a problem that the swallowing reflex moves back? Because food can then leak into the airway. Food and drink and all sorts of stuff can leak into the airway. This is not great because then you can aspirate on that food and drink, which you don't want to do. Gets in your lungs and you end up possibly having aspiration pneumonia, which is really bad. Otherwise, if you don't get aspiration pneumonia, you just cough for a bunch of minutes and presumably the food and liquid are just shot out of your throat. What are some ways that we can view the swallow? Well, the barium swallow and endoscopy are 2 ways that we can look at it. Barium swallow is, of course, something that we're going to do with an x-ray machine. There's a barium solution in something that you're drinking, which you can thicken with, thickeners like arrowroot thickeners or flour or whatever. And you swallow those different thicknesses of liquid and see what happens as it goes down through the whole swallowing pathway. Where does it get stuck? Does it leak before it is supposed to? Well, it's not supposed to leak. Does it leak when you're chewing? Does it start heading down the pathway before it's supposed to? I guess is what I'm trying to say. All these things. And then the other way that you can look at this is endoscopy, which of course is the same little camera that goes up your nose and down the back of your throat. There are pluses and minuses of both of these. The barium swallow, you can see the entire swallow, but it's just from a side view, and it's just 2 colors. So you don't get a lot of... it's hard to orient yourself. You can't 100% see what's going on. And you're usually under a time constraint with barium swallow. Endoscopy is like a full color camera. You can get a better view of things, but when you swallow and the larynx moves up and out of the way, it occludes the camera. So you don't actually see what happens during the actual swallow. You just see like what's leading up to the swallow, and is there anything left behind after the swallow. So typically what you're going to do is you're going to start with endoscopy with a bunch of different thicknesses of liquids, have somebody swallow all these. You want to look for, is there leaking before the swallow reflex? Is there anything left behind after the swallowing reflex? Then, once you know these things, you can go to the barium swallow and see what's actually happening during the swallowing procedure, too. Okay, I'm going to take a drink for a second. Okay, what is the cricopharyngeus muscle? It's also known as the upper esophageal sphincter. Yay. What happens during swallowing? And I don't mean just to the upper esophageal sphincter or the cricopharyngeus. I mean for everything. What happens when you swallow? There's a bunch of things. The velum moves up. We talked about that. Respiration reflexively stops. We also talked about that. The vocal folds are going to adduct. The epiglottis is going to close over the vocal folds. The larynx is going to move up and out of the way. And the upper esophageal sphincter is going to relax. This is going to allow the bolus to go down into the esophagus and start heading on its journey to meet a toilet. What is a problem that can happen when constrictors don't work together during swallowing? Peristalsis. That's pulsion diverticulum. What happens with pulsion diverticula is the epithelial lining protrudes between the muscles. Food gets stuck in that kind of little poochy area out between the muscles, and bacteria can grow in there then, which leads to pain, also fever a lot of times. It's remedied usually with just a laparoscopic procedure. You just go in, cut it out, cauterize it, and put a little mesh so the epithelial lining can't come out between the muscles anymore. Hey, what happens during vomiting? Well, everything that happened during swallowing and more, such as the lower esophageal sphincter is going to relax, the tongue is going to protrude, and the abs are going to contract. So this should help you think of breathing out, forcibly breathing out. The abs contract then, and air gets shot out of you. When you're breathing out, of course, your lower esophageal sphincter and probably your upper esophageal sphincter are closed. So you're not throwing up every time you breathe out. But if your abs contract and those esophageal sphincters are open, then you throw up. So there you go. This is gross, but people talk about projectile vomit, and what's going on there is sometimes, depending on the severity of the illness, your abs will contract a lot more because they want to get so much more out of your stomach, so the bacteria or whatever it is doesn't continue making you sick. And if the abs contract really tightly, the abs and obliques contract really tightly all at once, this can create projectile vomit. So there you go. It's great knowledge to have, I guess. Okay, let's talk about sensation, taste sensation, and smell. What are the tastes? Salty, sweet, bitter, sour, and umami are the tastes. Salty, sweet, bitter, and sour are the ones that we've known about for a while. Umami, we did know about in the early 1900s, but it wasn't taken seriously. It wasn't officially inducted into science until the 1980s. But it is now. So umami is one of our 5 major tastes. Where are the tastes? Pretty much everywhere. The idea that there are zones on your tongue that just correspond to salty, and then sweet, and then bitter, blah, 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 isn't true. And it's definitely not true that this is the same for everybody. Different people may have zones of concentrated, like this is where I taste salty more. So that can happen, but it's not going to be the same from person to person. It's more like a fingerprint. Everybody's different. Hooray. And they're just kind of like mostly randomly spaced throughout. Why is this? Well, because you're eating food. You need to sense these chemicals. It doesn't make sense that all of the sensation points are going to be on the tip of your tongue. What if you're eating something that doesn't get on the tip of your tongue and you need to know that it tastes bitter and terrible? You're just going to go ahead and eat it? I mean, one of the ways that we know that food is not good is that it's bitter and sometimes sour. I mean, so if you think about babies, dogs, people who don't have adventurous tastes, they're usually like way into the salty and the sweet and the umami. But bitter and sour are like not things that they're super into. Those both come like later. You either learn it or you just grow into enjoying it, or you're seeking out something new. One of the reasons why people think that we don't like those in the beginning is we're predisposed to not like them because when something that is, well, think about stale. Something stale used to be salty or sweet. It's gotten stale. It tastes so disgustingly bitter. So that's one of the reasons why we don't. We're predisposed not to like bitter and sour. So it doesn't make sense that it would just be in one spot of your tongue. It's like so ridiculous. They're spaced everywhere. I don't know where that. The person that came up with you only use 10% of your brain was probably the same person that's like, and you taste salty on the edges of your tongue. But whatever. That guy's dumb. Okay, so what else does taste rely on? Vision and smell. What the food looks like. I should also say expectation is another thing, which, sometimes comes from smell and vision, but not always. Expectation, vision, smell, these are all things that help us figure out what we're tasting. And the full experience of actually tasting something isn't just what the chemoreceptors on your tongue is telling you that you're tasting. It's also what you're smelling. It's what you're expecting. It's what the food looks like. Sometimes also how it feels. And that's like the full experience. If you've ever done one of those eating in the dark things, that's so crazy because you have no idea what to expect. You can, just by the way that something moves or the way that the light shines off of it, you get an idea if it's like, is it jiggly? Is it solid? Is it crunchy? Is it slimy? We know all these things. But if you're eating in the dark, you have no idea. All you have is smell and taste. Sometimes they'll even try to cover up some of the smells. Not all of them, but like you won't be able to smell what's going on in the kitchen. You'll only smell the dish that's being brought to you. So it's an interesting thing. You should do it. If you, you don't have to go to a place to do it either. It usually costs a lot to do that, but you can just do with friends, close your eyes, and have somebody bring you food. Where the taste buds are on the tongue, they're also on the lingual side of the epiglottis. Your epiglottis has taste buds, which is totally crazy. It doesn't have like a ton, but it has some. And then also the soft palate. There's taste buds on the soft palate. What kind of taste buds are there? There are a few different types. There's 4 different types. The velate papilla are the large ones with a moat around them. They're mostly on the back of your tongue to hold in the saliva, so you can actually taste it. Because at that point the saliva is trying to like go down into your esophagus. Fungiform are these large ones. They're actually a lot like the velate ones, but without the moat, and they're just kind of interspersed randomly on your tongue. The foliate ones are very leaf-like on the side. They look more like a flame or like a leaf. They're mostly on the sides of your tongue. And the filiform papilla, these are the most common. These are just these little cilia, hair-like looking ones that are all over your tongue. And none of them are more likely to be any taste than anything else. In fact, in most of these individual taste pores, you've actually got all different taste receptors. So there you go. What's in a taste pore? Cilia that bond with taste chemicals, to release a neurotransmitter. So the chemicals are going to bond with the cilia. That's going to release a neurotransmitter, and that's going to then give you the sensation of flavor. Taste could be processed in a few different areas, but I think one of the most likely areas is the insula. And the reason for that is it processes a lot of visceral emotions and other visceral stimuli, which taste is. Okay, I have to take another drink. Okay, what picks up chemicals in the nasal cavity? Cilia, similar to what's going on in the taste pore. They're very similar. What am I talking about? They're very similar senses in that they're both chemoreceptors. They're both sensing chemicals. Just one is chemicals that can be like broken down into saliva, and the other are chemicals that get pushed up into the air. So there's cilia inside the nasal passage that are going to different odor molecules are going to attach to the cilia, and then those are going to send a neurotransmitter onto the brain. All of the cilia are inside a large structure called the glomerulus. Multiple of them are called glomeruli. The glomeruli are special because they're the interface between the sense receptor and the nervous system. It's like the closest one that we have in the body, directly to the brain. It's just ridiculous. This scent goes almost directly from, here's the outside of my body, right? Because the inside of your nasal passages aren't that protected from the outside world. It's not even like your mouth, right? Like, you just sniff up stuff all the time. And then you go from the inside of your nasal passages, you follow the cilia up, there's your glomerulus. You're in the, oh man. Well, why can't I remember the name of it? Your first cranial nerve. Your olfactory nerve. There we go. You're in the olfactory nerve already. It's just ridiculous how quickly and how little of the body there is to get into that olfactory nerve. How many different smells can humans detect? About 1,000. What decides how many you detect? Because I say about 1,000. It's 1,000 on average. Some people could be as much as 2,000. Genes. Some people are super sniffers. Some people are not. The person who I did my PhD with, you have to have like a faculty mentor when you do your PhD. He was color anomalous, which isn't quite colorblind, but it's close. He also was the opposite of a super sniffer, so he maybe only could smell about 500 different smells and something else. But like he studies sensation and perception just like I do, but he has like the worst sensibilities. He's got good hearing and musical ability, but other than that, like all the senses are pretty dulled, which is funny. Do you lose your sense of smell after having a laryngectomy? Not really. The reason is because you're not breathing through your nose. So if you learned how to breathe with a yawn, like the polite yawn they call it, so just breathing in through your nose, that can help people who've had a laryngectomy smell again. Some people lose smell and taste as they age, or with damage, like stroke, things like that. Which tastes tend to be the most impacted? Sweet and salty are the most impacted. Those change the most. They either get reduced or they change somehow. And bitter is impacted the least for some reason, which is a sucky thing, right? You have a stroke or you get older, and the things that we like the best, sweet and salty, go away. And bitter just hangs out like a crappy IPA. Okay. What is the size of the receptor fields in the mouth? Pretty small. Remember, small receptor fields means that there's a lot of sensation. The smaller the receptive field, the more sensation there is. So, I'm trying to think of a way, like I don't want you to get confused and think that large receptive fields means more sensation, because it's not true. It's kind of like, it's inverse. Small receptive fields means more sensation. A receptive field can really only tell that something is touching it. That's all it does. Oh, something's touching me here. So if it's a large receptive field, something's touching you there, but you don't really know exactly where it's touching you. If you've had, like on your calf, a fly land on you or something when you're outside in the summer, you don't exactly know where it is without looking. You just kind of like brush your leg and the fly goes away. But if a fly lands on your hand, you can feel exactly where it is because your hands have small receptive fields. So you can pinpoint where these things are. That's true with your mouth too. So presumably if a fly landed in your mouth, you'd know exactly where it was. That's disgusting. Try not to. Don't let flies land in your mouth. That's gross. Anyway, lots of sensation. Small receptive fields, lots of sensation. What senses pressure? There's a specific type of cell that does this. Those are the Meissner corpuscles. And the Meissner corpuscles start what reflex? The chewing reflex. Pressure on the roof of the mouth, pressure on the Meissner corpuscles in the roof of the mouth begin the chewing reflex. What cells sense light touch? Merkel cells. And those start what? They're not just in the mouth, they're also around the mouth, the lips and the cheeks. And the Merkel cells start what reflex? The rooting and sucking reflex in babies. What types of temperature receptors are there? Cold and hot. That's not hard to figure out. What are pain receptors called? They're called nociceptors. Noci is just a Latin for pain. It's probably Latin. Sometimes they throw some Greek in there. I don't actually remember if this is Latin or Greek. I've had Latin, but you don't use it. I'm not like walking around talking in Latin all the time. Anyway, nociceptors are pain receptors. And my voice is starting to go away again. What is released with extended pain, like eating spicy food? Well, that is, my friends, delicious epinephrine. So it's possible the reason why some of us enjoy eating spicy foods is because you get that initial hit that's a little bit unpleasant, but also kind of interesting. And then as the pain continues, you get this great flood of epinephrine, which feels great. I didn't look up for you the name of this restaurant that has the wonderful let's see. I think you just have like you're watching me type this in. Should have thought about that. It's Old Town Taste. That's what it is. Yeah, Broadway and McClintock. That's it. Just the most amazing Szechuan chicken. So, if you find yourself hungry while you're studying for this exam, go to Old Town Taste. I'm not being sponsored by them, but I feel like I should call them and tell them that they should sponsor me. Anyway, the Szechuan chicken is great. It's salty if you like salty food. And it's hot, too. Anyway, it's really good. Try it out. You'll buzz from the Szechuan peppercorns, and you'll also get epinephrine because it's hot. And it's salty, which tastes good. So there you go. Speaking of how your expectations and your vision and everything can lead to your perception of taste, there was also at the same restaurant a potato dish. I love potatoes. I love hash browns. And I thought that I ordered something that was going to taste like hash browns. And it was basically raw potatoes that looked like hash browns. So this is very similar to my funeral potato fiasco. And first bite, I was like, these are terrible. I don't want to eat any more of this. And then I put it in the fridge. I came back to it the next day, knowing what I was expecting. They were actually pretty good. It's a good restaurant. But when you're expecting hash browns and you get not hash browns, it's weird. Okay, let's talk about clinical concerns. We've covered some of these clinical concerns when we were talking about smell, like the people that have had a laryngectomy, but let's talk about anosmia. What is it? It doesn't mean that you don't have a nose. It means that you can't smell, and usually you can't taste also. Sensory nerves that go to the face and the tongue are more in danger than other sensory nerves. Why is that? Because they're shallow. There's not a lot of skin to protect them in. Once they come out of the bone, they're just there to be damaged. So car wrecks, boxing also, but who boxes? It doesn't really matter. I guess probably also MMA, but not many of us are doing that. Car wrecks, though, that happens a lot. You can get damage to your sensory nerves in your face because they're shallow. Not a lot of protection. With some nerve damage that goes to the tongue, you can end up with burning tongue syndrome. It's not the only thing that you can end up with, so I should kind of clarify this. You can end up with bilateral loss of taste and sensation, bilateral loss of taste or sensation, lateral loss of either of those things or both, or nothing can happen, or you can end up with burning tongue syndrome. So when we were talking about the cranial nerves in the first section, we talked about how most of these things are contralateral, right? You have a nerve that crosses over the right side, controls the left side of the body. Well, what's interesting is when you're up in the face area, they haven't crossed over yet. Or, more likely is what it seems, for some of us they've crossed over and some haven't. Like, there might be individual differences in this. The tongue is right around the area of what's called decussation, which is when when the nerve fibers cross over. So we know that below decussation, everything crossed over. Above decussation, nothing is crossed over. At decussation, it's kind of like we assumed that it was the same for everybody, and there was just a point where they all switched. But a lot of the research looking at the tongue is showing, hey, this is screwed up. Because you can impair somebody's nerve, sensory nerve, to their tongue. You can do that with Novocaine and other, other anesthetics for research purposes. And when you do that, some people are able to still taste everything, which would imply that the nerve on one side is still providing sensation and taste for the entire tongue. So you're blocking one side of the nerves that go there, but the entire tongue is basically getting nerve projections from both sides. For other people, you can deaden one side and half their tongue goes to sleep, but it isn't reliably the contralateral or ipsilateral side, so it's really confusing. And then some people end up with burning tongue syndrome, and this is similar to other nerve pain that some people have. There's burning sensations that go along with nerve pain. And burning tongue syndrome isn't that different, but it is called burning tongue syndrome because if you have burning sensation with any of your mouth nerves, it tends to be the tongue for some reason. Okay, OMD can cause what? Breathing problems, speech problems, unflattering appearance, self-esteem issues. That's pretty much it. You could also talk about deviated septum, but that's breathing problems. Signs of OMD: tongue thrust, mouth breathing, and a high and narrow palate. OMD might be caused by thumb sucking, allergies, abnormal tongue placement, pacifier use, or any, like a blanket or anything like that, or a tongue tie. So one of the good ways for young children to not go through this family of disorders, if they have a tongue tie, is to have the tongue tie removed. If they are using a pacifier, you want to have them stop that. If they're sucking on a blanket or their thumb, you want to have them stop that. Also, abnormal tongue placement can be retrained behaviorally, and allergies, that's a difficult one. You might have to put them on allergy meds, which causes other things too. So the allergy one is harder to figure out, but with all the others, there's a solution. Okay, that's it. That's what you need to know for your exam. Good luck on this exam, and then also good luck on the final exam if you decide to take it. Okay. Bye. Oh, I have to find the stop button. Okay, there we go.